Hey y'all, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Sierra and I post videos on this channel every single Friday. I post Christian booktube content, so if you're into that kind of thing, I highly recommend pressing subscribe. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all of the books I read in May and my thoughts on them. I read quite a lot of different books that I don't normally read, which it proved to be an interesting month of reading, and some of them were really good and some of them I didn't prefer as much, but we're gonna get into that in just a second. If you are a returning subscriber slash watcher, you will notice this is not my normal setup. I have recently moved houses in my area, so I'm in a new house and I will be getting a better setup eventually, but for right now this is where the videos are going to be because this is the cleanest background I can find. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first book I read this month was The Curator's Daughter by Melanie Dobson, a World War II time slip novel. My absolute favorite. It was 5 stars, 10 out of 10, all the perfect ratings that you could give it. It was so beautiful, so unique, so different than anything else I've ever read from her, which was really nice. Both of the main characters, both present day and in history, that's what I'm looking for, were quite unique and they just made up their own characters so well, like their strengths and weaknesses and their personality. Just, it was so perfect and so wonderful. I loved both of them so much, and I think I really appreciated the take on the historical story because it was about a woman who was basically kind of duped by the Nazis at first and forced to work for them, forced to wed a Nazi, forced to be a mother to like continue the perfect white race that was, you know, Hitler's thing. And just the way she overcame all of it was absolutely beautiful and breathtaking, and I don't want to spoil the story. I literally finished the book in 3 days and it was pretty long. I don't remember how long it is. I'll try and find it, but it was definitely over 300 pages and I just was blown away with it. Read it in 3 days. The second book I read was When Twilight Breaks by Sarah Sundin, also a World War II story. Not time slip though, it was set entirely in 1938 and 1939, maybe? I don't remember. It feels like so long ago that I read that book, but it wasn't really. And that book, When Twilight Breaks, completely blew me away, like knocked me off my feet. I finished it in basically one sitting. Like I read the first 10 chapters one day and then the next day I read the rest of it, like in one sitting, not stopping the entire afternoon. It was that good. And let me tell you, my expectations for that book were like right here. I expected it to kind of be a cheesy, cliche romance, you know, like wartime romance, because I just kind of like, that's the vibe I've always gotten from Sarah Sundin, like when I've heard about her books. But oh my word, it was probably the best slow burn romance I have ever read. Oh my goodness, the perfect amount of like suspense and plot and the characters like getting closer, all wrapped into one story. I don't know how that book wasn't longer. Like it felt like this epic saga that lasted a long time, but in reality it was like only 350 pages, something like that. Again, like read it in basically one sitting. It was amazing, and I definitely want to check out some of her other works because I have done her a disservice in my expectations for way too long. The next book I read was The Girl Behind the Red Rope by Ted Dekker and his daughter Rachel Dekker. First book I read that was co-authored, and I thought it would be a lot different than, like the writing style would be a lot different, but it wasn't too different than a normal book, if that makes sense. This book, I can't even summarize it. It was very different than what I normally read. kind of dystopian almost, and centered around like a cult. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Looking back, I would probably give it 3 out of 5 stars. Although the story was really good and taught some good lessons, it just wasn't my cup of tea. And I don't know, I'd give it like 3.5 stars. Again, like, you have to take this review with a grain of salt, because I'm over here fangirling over wartime stories. Other people love dystopian stuff. So anyway, that's that book. Probably won't read anything like it anytime soon. The next book I read was A Time to Stand by Robert Whitlow. This was a legal book set in the South, based around this court case of a white police officer who shot a black young man, and then a black lawyer ends up taking his case, like defending him. And this book, like, completely was, I don't really have many good things to say about it, because it took half of the book for the lawyer to finally even meet the police officer, and then she was kind of required to take on his case with the job she was getting, and she was against it at first, and then she did have a change in her heart and decided to take on the case. But I was expecting like this, not like a thriller novel, but kind of a more fast-paced, suspenseful, like court case kind of book, where it's like, oh, what's gonna happen, and this is the defense and this was the prosecution, but that was not it at all. It was very slow. There were definitely parts of the book where I was like, that had no business being there. Like, there was no point to that scene. The writing style was definitely off for me. I didn't like it. So I'm probably not gonna read any other books by this author. I'm not gonna stay away from the genre entirely, because I do love like legal stuff and law and all of that, but just, I don't know, probably not from this author. It was not my favorite. The next book I read was The Postcard by Beverly Lewis. This was an Amish fiction book, and I don't normally read Amish fiction at all. I got this from a thrift store just on a whim, because I've seen Beverly Lewis like everywhere in Christian fiction circles, and I was like, maybe it's time I just check out her books. And it didn't like entirely disappoint. It wasn't as good as I thought it was gonna be, but I'd still give it 4 out of 5 stars, and I would read the second book in the series, like if I ever found it somewhere, but I don't think I would like jump straight to this author again, because it was an interesting story and it moved very slowly at times, and other times it moved rather quickly. It was a good book, but it wasn't like a super, super great book. It's not one I would rave and rave about, but I liked it. And again, I'd read the second one in the series. The next book I read was Grace by Max Lucado. Max Lucado is my favorite Christian nonfiction author, and my mom actually gave me this book. It's super little. I read a chapter each morning as kind of like a devotion and something to pray about. It was super thought-provoking, and I really liked it. I love his really down-to-earth, just simple writing style. It just always sits so well with me and makes me very happy. And this book did not disappoint. Like, 5 out of 5 stars. It was super good, and I would recommend it. And I don't recommend nonfiction, as most of you know. The final book I read was The Farmer's Daughter Romance Collection by multiple different authors, because it actually has 5 different stories in it. And this is the only physical book I have with me, because all the others are in boxes at the moment. And this, honestly, it's one book, but like, it's technically 5 because it's 5 stories, and they were all so unique and diverse, and I really actually liked it better than I thought I would. Again, had low expectations, cheesy cliche romance. Some of them were. Like, some of the scenes in some of the stories definitely were, which I was, again, like, I had my expectations at a point where I was okay with that. Like, I was just fine with it. But other, like, I'd say probably 3 out of the 5 were really, really good. Like 5-star stories that I genuinely enjoyed. And I'm not sure I would read them again. I probably would not read the whole collection again, but if I ever wanted something super lighthearted to fall back on to read, I would read one of my favorites out of here. Those are all of the books I read in May. It was quite a lot, quite like so many different ones. You know, I started off strong with some wartime fiction, then, you know, that dystopian like cult book, legal, nonfiction, Amish, and then the romance, the Western romance. Yeah. Oh, one thing I didn't say about that book is that reading it, like reading all of the stories back to back, made me feel like I was watching Little House on the Prairie. And I loved that because that is one of my favorite shows. So anyway, that was my final thought on that book. So a lot of different genres, a lot of fun things, a lot of not so fun, well, some not so fun things, a lot of fun things. Doing this wrap up was really fun. I was kind of able to like look back on my month and be like, oh yeah, that was my thoughts on that book. I only read that book 3 weeks ago, even though it felt like 3 months ago. So as always, drop your author and book recommendations in the comments and I'll be sure to check them out. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and want to see more like it, please give a thumbs up and even possibly subscribe. And I will see you next week for whatever video that is. Until then, bye!